So Yvonne informed me that my hat and my jersey clash. And I know that. I do. I know that. In terms of San Jose, I have a hat. I think it's still at my old apartment. I don't have it here. Um, the Sharks are, and I'll say this straight up front, one of my least favorite teams in the NHL. They're top three. They're behind Anaheim, sometimes behind the Kings, sometimes ahead of the Kings. Depends on the year. But it wasn't always like that. And San Jose, luckily, I have this because of the 1992 yearbook I got in the mail through eBay. Let's look at the expansion San Jose Sharks, shall we? If they could win games on toughness alone, the San Jose Sharks would have little to worry about in their debut season in the NHL. The team's initial roster is dotted with players who are described as aggressive by franchise management. It has attempted to build a team opponents won't be too excited about playing against, especially on a small ice surface, Boston Garden size, at Cal Palace in Daly City. The Sharks will play there for 2 seasons while an arena is being built in San Jose. We have some players who make you pay the price, Sharks general manager Jack Ferrara said. But the roster doesn't include a single player who scored 20 or more goals at the NHL level last season, which means the Sharks may be in for some long nights in the league's high-scoring Smythe division. On the bright side, the team is young and has several prospects who may pay big dividends down the road as long as management follows through on promises to be patient and doesn't panic if things don't go well right away. Whatever the future holds, a reasonable goal for now is a 20-victory season, and in the Smythe division, that would be quite an accomplishment. They wound up with They got 17 in their first year. They only had 11 in their second year. Goaltending. And successful hockey teams are built from the net out. The Sharks have poured themselves a solid foundation. Soviet goalie Artur Serbe, who had a career goals against average of 2.72 in 4+ seasons in the Soviet National League, is regarded as one of the world's finest netminders and has the potential to be one of the top 4 or 5 goalies in the NHL. Yes, he was that hyped. But to be number one in the Sharks, Irbe must beat out veteran Brian Hayward, who is proven NHL goalie with a career record of 140, 138, and 36. And poised to challenge these two are New York Islanders prospect Jeff Hackett and former Minnesota North Stars prospect Jarmo Millis. Hackett flashed signs of brilliance despite his 5-18-1 record with the Islanders last season, and Millis had a strong season with the International League where he was 24-13-1 for the Kalamazoo Wings. Combined, the four give the Sharks a deep talent pool in which to swim. Defense. Although he won't turn 30 until April, Bob McGill became an old man when the Sharks claimed him from the Chicago Blackhawks during the league's May 30th expansion draft. Of the 16 defensemen on the roster, McGill is the only one older than 24. He's also the only one with more than 86 games of NHL experience. At the heart of a long list of promising young defensemen are former Minnesota teammates Neil Wilkinson and Rob Zettler. Both get quality playing time with the North Stars last season and figure to get a lot more with the Sharks. Link Gates, who piled up 222 penalty minutes in only 28 games in the IHL last season, is potentially solid, but must overcome a drinking problem that has him in and out of alcohol rehabilitation centers. Yeah, that's in here. Jobs are also available for the likes of Dan Kesmer, Dean Kolstad, Rick Lassard, Pat McLeod, and Jason Moore. Soviet defenseman Sandis Ozolinsh was a second-round pick in the June 22nd entry draft, but might be encouraged to play for Dinamo Riga of the Soviet National League for at least one more season. Center, at some point second-round draft choice, Ray Whitney may be a great NHL playmaker, but the Sharks might have to wait at least a season or two for that to happen. Whitney, a 5'9", 160-pound dynamo from the Western League Spokane Chiefs, had 67 goals and 185 points last year, but the Sharks don't plan to rush him onto the roster. And in their defense, they didn't. If Whitney doesn't make the team right away, the Sharks will rely primarily on veterans Kelly Kissio and Tony Herkus. Kissio, formerly the captain of the New York Rangers, was a 15-goal scorer for the Rangers last season, and Herkus scored 16 goals for the Quebec Nordiques. Although injuries limited Kissio to only 51 games, he's expected to be 100% again after undergoing off-season surgery to have a groin muscle reattached. Jean-Francois Quentin, 74 points for Kalamazoo last season, is another candidate for a job up the middle. And the Sharks also may experiment with former Vancouver Canucks left winger Craig Cox at center. Wingers. The Sharks are banking on top draft pick Pat Falloon to be a star one day, but Falloon is another player who may be a season away from the NHL. Falloon, a right winger, was a line mate of Whitney's at Spokane last season and had 64 goals and 138 points, but he may spend much of this season with the Canadian Olympic team. Right winger Brian Mullen, a line mate of Kissio's in New York, had 62 points for the Rangers last season, 19 goals and 43 assists, and should be one of the top scorers for the Sharks. David Bruce is another right winger with significant NHL experience, 155 games, but he spent most of last season with the IHL's Prairie River Rats, scoring 64 goals and 116 points. A reasonably deep list of right wingers also includes minor league standouts Jeff Medill, Ed Courtney, and Peter Lappin. Some of those right wingers may have to move to the left side, however, because the Sharks are relatively thin at left wing, where the team is counting primarily upon Murray Garbutt and Kalamazoo teammates Mike McHugh and Kevin Evans. Management, owners George and Gordon Gund are perceived as villains in Minnesota, where they're blamed for nearly running the Stars into the ground. But they say they've learned from previous mistakes and are committed to making the Sharks a successful franchise. Coach George Kingston has limited NHL experience, but is known for being a patient teacher, and associate coach Bob Murdoch was the NHL's Coach of the Year in 89-90, where he led the Winnipeg Jets to a 37-32-11 record. The Sharks run over their heads in the wide-open Smythe division, where goals often are scored in bunches. An aggressive defense and solid goaltending will help the Sharks in some games. Keep the Sharks in some games, but they don't have enough firepower to match up their Smythe division rivals and figure to reside in the division cellar. They did, but not by very much. When the Sharks first came into the season, the big thing was the logo and the teal. Everything about the teal. Everybody wanted to see how the Sharks were on the ice, but that original jersey is still the one that, people look back on fondly. I believe anyways. This is it right here being worn by Link Gates, who, he had drinking problems. I'm surprised that's actually in here, but, these things happen. And this right here is the jersey they were wearing a couple years ago. And the one they're wearing now is a little less flamboyant. That's the jersey they were wearing in between, which has a lot of busyness going on. Greatest team ever. So this is the best San Jose Sharks team. Keep in mind this book was written before last season's Stanley Cup final run. Young Finns flourished. San Jose Sharks have been teetering on the edge of glory for many years now. A perennial regular season powerhouse, the team has experienced only minimal playoff success. The 2003-04 version of the teal and black may not have been loaded with stars and offensive power, but they were young and gelled at the right time. It was a season that saw the emergence of a new generation in San Jose. The team was led in goal scoring by 24-year-old Patrick Marleau and 23-year-old Jonathan Cheechoo. Both players found the net 28 times, and Marleau led the Sharks in points with 57. A 25-year-old Marco Sturm also had a productive season, netting 21 goals and 41 points. Brad Stewart, 24, led the rear guards, posting a career-high 39 points. The Sharks believed in their youth movement so much they dealt longtime captain Owen Nolan to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Alan McCauley, Brad Boyes, and a first-round draft pick that later became Mark Stewart. This was a move that further solidified management's commitment to retool. Depth between the pipes was a non-issue. The Sharks had Evgeny Nabokov starting and a solid backup in Vesa Toskala. Waiting in the midst was a young Finn by the name of Mika Kiprasov. Coming off a season where they didn't even qualify for the playoffs, the Sharks claimed the Pacific Division title with 104 points and got past the St. Louis Blues and Colorado Avalanche with only 3 losses. However, they were ousted in the Western Conference Final in 6 games by a determined Calgary Flames team led by Jarome Iginla and Mika Kiprasov, who the Sharks dealt to the Flames early in that same season. While the Sharks have yet to sink their teeth into a Stanley Cup, the 03-04 youth movement provided fans with their first of 3 trips to the NHL's Final Four. It's a huge step for the whole organization, Nabokov said at the time. So, that's really the key, isn't it? The Sharks are a team that have been close. Now, last night I talked about the Blues and how it's kind of a sad story. Sharks isn't a sad story, really. They've only been around for 25 years. They have built themselves into a perennial contender. You take a look at things, and despite the fact that they missed the playoffs in 2015, that's an outlier. That's not a standard thing for them. And I was one that before last season started, not this current season, not 16-17, before 15-16, I said, the Sharks are done. I was very convinced that San Jose was done, as a team at or near the top of the league. I was wrong. Um, and I didn't make that prediction this year. I actually said San Jose is probably the class of the West. And it's funny, too, because last year they were a losing team at home. They won 18 and they lost 20. On the road, they had 28 wins and 10 losses, which is crazy. So, that kind of record won't be repeated this year. But San Jose has an interesting team and an interesting record, and I'm genuinely impressed by San Jose as an organization, even if I'm not a fan of a lot of things with the team. Now, it's funny. They talk about George Kingston in the expansion uh, that I had the magazine for. Kingston lasted 1 year. Um, and then in 92-93 was fired for Kevin Constantine, who had 1 year, and then um, he led the team to a resurgence, and then he got fired in favor of Jim Wiley, who got fired for Al Sims, who got fired for Daryl Sutter, who had a few more years, but then we went through Cap Raider as a, an interim, who then went to Ron Wilson. Ron Wilson was coach for a while, then Todd McClellan, and now it's Peter DeBoer. It's a lot of coaches for a team that's been around for 25 years. General managers, Jack Ferreira only existed as general manager for 1 year. Chuck Grillo took over in 92-93. And then it went over to Dean Lombardi during 96-97. Lombardi was around till 2002-2003, and then Doug Wilson took over and is still there now. So there is some stability at the top. And in terms of their drafting is usually pretty good. Although I'm looking at their last couple of years, the 15 draft, the 16 draft, and 16 they had nobody in the first round, so there's no harm, no foul there. But there is some reason to be concerned about the long-term future for San Jose. I'll say that straight off. But the Sharks are a team that, again, much like St. Louis, I have a hard time finding a whole lot in here. When I looked up the best teams that they've had, everything seemed to point back to the 03-04 team. Last year's team obviously achieved more than that and should be viewed as a more successful, better franchise. But despite that, they didn't win, and Pittsburgh's win over them was undisputed. Really, there really wasn't any way to argue that San Jose should have won the cup. And you have to ask yourself, where do they go from here? Now, I'm going to avoid going to just saying, oh, here's where our career leaders are, because when a team's existed for 25 years, your career scoring leaders aren't going to be an extremely impressive list. Now, there we go. Right now, it's November 22nd. Anaheim's losing at home to the Islanders. That division is still wide open. The fact that the Oilers are leading it again as I record this shows that the division is very, very wide open. One sec. Because at the start of this season, I said San Jose was going to be the class of the West. And there's still plenty of time left. And yeah, they right now are statistically ahead of Anaheim. And if Anaheim loses that game at home, then they're firmly below San Jose. San Jose is within striking distance of Edmonton if they can get more consistency in their game. That's really the trick, but that's a trick with a lot of teams in hockey right now. Consistency is not easy to find. As far as San Jose goes, I don't cheer for them, and I think it's funny too because anybody who watches this channel regularly knows I'm a huge fan of Boston, and you would think the Joe Thornton trade would be one that I rued the day that he was traded. I didn't. The first year when Joe Thornton put up 126 points, I think it was, to get the Art Ross and the Hart, and everybody talked about how great he was. I was upset that year, but outside of last season, when they got to the final. Joe Thornton has never really been the playoff warrior that he should be for a guy his size, for being a Canadian kid, for having every earmark of being a great hockey player. He just hasn't quite been that in the postseason. San Jose is an organization that I think will win a Stanley Cup in the next 5 years. I don't know when. I can't, you know, I can't say I have a crystal ball into what year it's going to happen, but I do believe it will happen. I think the Sharks as a team, there are very few teams in the league that can match up with them on paper. As the day that I've done this, or the day I'm doing this video, Brent Burns has been signed to an 8-year, $64 million extension. It's perfectly fine, both in terms of the term and the cap hit. No problem with either. He is full value for that. And the question really becomes one of, as Thornton and Marlowe age and retire, which is going to happen, everybody retires, can Couture, Pavelski, and the rest of that supporting group keep them up and competitive and keep them in a position to challenge for a Stanley Cup? Because the Pacific Division is very winnable this year, and very, very, very likely that San Jose comes out of that division to go into the Final Four. But in terms of being able to get past a Chicago or a St. Louis in that second to last round, that semifinal, that conference final, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a big challenge, especially, if, let's say they played St. Louis again. Well, St. Louis remembers what happened last spring, so that gives them impetus to try to overcome that, especially since St. Louis has so many demons of their own that they're fighting. In terms of San Jose, though, as a team, I think it's ironic that I'm doing this video on a day that Las Vegas has revealed their team name, and I think the branding is weak, because the branding for San Jose is the best branding in hockey. There's more classic. I mean, Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, Detroit Red Wings, all of these names are iconic. But in terms of a brand, in terms of something that the logo is recognized everywhere, and it is an aggressive brand, and it's good for kids, and it's good, it's very inclusive. Sharks is fantastic, and it is a logo that is that's been updated many times over, and they all look sharp. I haven't seen a San Jose logo yet that doesn't, to me, look really sharp, even with the entire shark twisting around. Like, it still looks really good. So it's a team that I look at and I say, okay, they've been close, they've knocked on the door. Now they're ready to burst through it, and I really believe that'll happen. Whether it's Joe Thornton or not, I don't think so. I genuinely don't. I think Logan Couture and Joe Pavelski, though, have every single. I think they have every bit of potential needed to be Stanley Cup champions. And in goal, I think Martin Jones is underrated, and I think their blue line is. I would also say it's underrated. I think there's a lot in San Jose to like if you're a Sharks fan, and I'm not a Sharks fan, not even close. But I wouldn't bet against them coming out of that division, and I don't even know if I'd bet against them winning the Stanley Cup. I think they're in that mix of 5 or 6 teams that could win it. It depends on who's hot and who's playing exactly the right game at the right time, and it'll be interesting to see who does it. But anyways, there isn't really a whole lot else to add where San Jose is concerned. Again, I'm not getting into the career leaders because they've only been around 25 years. But yeah, they're a team I respect. Whether I like them or not, I respect them. That's part of where I think I diverge myself away from certain other fans. I can dislike a team intensely and still respect the organization and the players on that team. That's where I am with San Jose. I don't cheer when they win, but I have no ill will against their players or their management. And yeah, that's about all I have to say in regards to San Jose. If you're a Sharks fan browsing through, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. I will be doing videos. Tomorrow's Tampa. So Wednesday's Tampa, Thursday's Toronto, Friday's Vancouver, and then all we get left is Washington, Winnipeg, and then I got to come up with another video series idea because I love doing these series. I do. I love going through all 30 teams in the league over and over again. So, there's more series to do, there's more stuff to do, more stuff to look at. Hockey to me is a very fascinating sport, and this is part of the reason why, because you can look at each part of a team's existence and point out where they're at, where they're going, and then look back 10 years later and go, wow, they didn't get where they're going, or they got a lot further than they thought they would. San Jose is how you expand right. They didn't have the arena that first couple of years. They didn't have everything set, but they have really good management. And when things kind of went off the rails in year two, they fixed it. And they fixed it right away. So, anyways, yeah, that's really about all I have to say in regards to the Sharks. And I will likely get a new video or a new Sharks jersey at some point. We'll see. Anyways, I'm going to. I wish I had more to say. I do. I wish I had something really clever to throw in here, but I really don't. Thanks for watching. I will be back again tomorrow. And for those of you guys who are watching these videos, again, I'm trying to change it up on the fly and just do something different with each video. In San Jose's case, I'm looking at the expansion, looking at where they're at. Do you think San Jose wins the Stanley Cup in the next 5 years? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.